David Osterberg, retired epidemiologist of the Iowa Department of Public Health.
First of all, I am not an epidemiologist. I was at the department, I was at the College of Public Health at the University of Iowa for quite a while. And in fact, I was there long enough that I'm now an emeritus professor, which means I have free parking for life on campus. Very few people can say that. But I want to talk about something a little different, because this is what you hear from the industry. And that is that you can't do anything in Iowa. You decide to put up a CAFO, you decide to do anything, all the neighbors are going to resist. And there's nothing wrong with us, it's the neighbors that are the problem. And, you have to look at that to see whether it's so or not. And I've been working with something called a blue-green group, trying to make sure that when we do solar power, we have good union jobs for the people doing it. And we have two very large arrays of solar panels going into my county, Lynn County. One of those is at Palo. Palo is the old nuclear power plant at Iowa's only nuclear power plant, which has just gone down, mainly because it can't compete with wind, because wind is too cheap. When they decided to replace that with solar panels, I mean, everything was there to get the electricity out because it did that for, 40 years. All kinds of neighbors did protest and said, no, we don't want to have anything like that here because it's all the health concerns that they claimed. And in fact, I heard at one of these hearings, somebody whose house had been there for something like 30 years was worried that there were going to be solar panels in his neighborhood and that would bring down the value of his house. It was next to a nuclear power plant for 40 years. Now you have to be sympathetic to the industry when they say that. We looked, my colleague at the University of Iowa, Peter Thorne, and I did a study in 2019 on the health effect of wind turbines. A lot of people claim, and you'll see it all over the internet, that there are problems. We looked at it and could find lots of information out there, but nothing really authoritative. And in fact, this is what we concluded. After a thorough examination of the literature, we concluded there is no authoritative evidence that either audible sound or infrasound from wind turbines represents a risk to human health among neighbors. And we did that in the paper for the ISAC, for the Iowa State Association of Counties. Now let's look at CAFOs. There is so much evidence, and Joanne gave some of it, that what happens with these particular critters. There are all kinds of health effects. It is the contamination of water, it's a contamination of the air. Because there's so little regulation, everything, we can, and as Sylvia said a minute ago, we're not even sure what is coming out of them because there is so little that they have to do to comply with any kind of legislation, especially in the state of Iowa, where the legislation is about as weak as it is in any state in the nation. CAFOs, if you start out saying, look, neighbors don't like anything and therefore CAFOs are fine, do not believe it. There are so many health effects associated with CAFOs that we need to have a moratorium right now. We should not subject any more neighbors to this, and as Joanne also pointed out, the whole question of antibiotic resistance means that all of us, whether we are even remotely close to one of these facilities, is at risk. CAFOs are a health effect on Iowans, and we ought to have a moratorium, period.
Thank you so much. We do have a question for you, David, if you'll stick down here. Thank you.
David, you've been a state legislator. Why is it that CAFOs with all these health effects are ignored by state legislators?
Francis already knows the answer to this. I mean, I was out of the legislature before they passed the 1995 law, so I'm not in any way I didn't vote against it. I didn't have anything to do with it. But something to do with the 2002 law, which followed a major study done by Iowa State professors from the Department of College of Agriculture, and then about 18 people from our College of Public Health at the university, and concluded that there were certainly all kinds of problems, and yet the legislation that then followed from that set up this master matrix, which was just silly as far as trying to protect neighbors. They are very powerful, and it's amazing to me that a state legislator who represented a rural area, as I did, Cedar County was in my district, would hear again and again from people who might be their friends, but yet it was just decided that nobody was going to touch that issue. And that's what the Republican Party decided. You never actually began to debate it. You never let a good legislator like David Johnson never had his day in court. They would never even allow that bill, and he had several, I think 17 different pieces of legislation that he proposed. Not one of them even got a hearing at a subcommittee level. Wow. They just want to ignore it. It doesn't exist. And it's the problem neighbors who don't like anything. That's what they get away with. Thank you.
Thank you.